These are 3 stories of true events that have happened around Halloween. I do hope you enjoy them. Everyone please be safe and have a very happy Halloween. My story happened almost 10 years ago when my wife and I purchased an old farmhouse that I had planned to renovate. It was in the fall and it was getting close to Halloween. I was doing most of the work myself and it was going slow. I was 56 years old at the time, and the combination of cold air and years of working construction made my body ache. You might be asking yourself why I didn't just hire in a contractor and take a break from it. I guess part of it was ego and the other part was wanting to pinch pennies and save where I could. I had sunk a large sum of money into the property when I purchased it, and I couldn't see myself working forever to pay off debts. So I decided it would be like a project for me to undertake alone. It wasn't very long after I had begun knocking down walls and cutting plywood when I noticed some odd things happening inside the house. It started out small at first, like I would be cutting some wood, and as soon as the blade stopped spinning, I'd hear a rapping sound on the second floor. Almost like someone knocking the same way you would if you wanted to enter someone's house. I thought at first it could just be me hearing things, but my dog was with me every day, and when the sounds would happen, he'd cock his head to the side and always look up towards the second floor. I figured that this could be any number of things, since it was an older house and everything was wood, and it was cold and windy out. I brushed it off as just the house settling, or maybe tree branches hitting the roof, or maybe even an animal had gotten inside through one of the second floor windows that needed replacing. I consider myself to be extremely rational, so these were the explanations I kept coming up with time and again when I would hear that sound. However, after a few days of this, I got to thinking about the circumstances. I had been working on the house for a while, and just prior to that, I had never heard those sounds before. My dog had been there every day, and most of the time he just laid on the floor and slept, even when I had power tools running. I told my wife about the sounds and she immediately got freaked out. She refused to come to the house and told me to just hurry up and finish the work. She swore she wouldn't set foot on the property again until everything was complete. My wife is a bit superstitious, so I understand why she reacted like this. She also is a believer in ghosts, so again, I completely understood why she said what she said. I didn't want to argue with her, and I really didn't want to force her to come onto the property while I worked, so I just left well enough alone. One morning, I had arrived with my dog to the house, and I let him inside first while I gathered up my tools from the truck. When I got inside, I couldn't see him, but I could hear him whimpering. I called out to him, but he didn't come. I set my tools down and I followed the sound of his whimpering to the second floor. I couldn't see him at first, but I could see the puddles from where he had gotten sick all over the floor. I found him just next to the attic door. He was laying down and shaking. I immediately picked him up and I carried him downstairs. I drove him back home and he seemed to get better the further we got away from the farmhouse. Before then, I had never seen him like that, not even once. I left him home with my wife and I asked her to keep an eye on him and to take him to the vet immediately if he started getting worse. I drove back to the farmhouse, went inside, and I began taking my tools upstairs so I could get the window replaced. On my way up the steps, I set an extra box of screws on the window ledge by the first landing. I went upstairs and began my work replacing the window. When I had finished, I headed back downstairs and I remember looking at the box of screws as I passed it. It was still in the same spot and tightly up against the window pane bottom, with plenty of ledge space. I decided to leave my tools there that night and locked everything up inside. The next morning my dog was doing much better, and I no sooner opened the door to my truck that he jumped in and took his usual spot in the back seat. We got to the farmhouse and everything was still locked up, just as I had left it. When I got inside, however, I immediately noticed that some of my tools had been moved about. They were moved to different rooms inside the house that I had not even been in the previous day. I began walking up the steps when I heard that same rapping noise as before. This time it seemed to be coming from the attic. I couldn't get my dog to follow me up the stairs. He just sat there looking at me and he refused to come up even when I called him. I went up the stairs and I opened the attic door and was immediately greeted by the cold air. I went up inside and made a quick look around when I noticed something shiny laying on the floor to the back of the attic. I walked over to it and I could see that it was a hammer. My hammer. The one I had left on the second floor the day before. How did it get up here, I asked myself. It was then that I heard a crash coming from the downstairs. I hurried down from the attic, and when I got to the steps, I could see that the box of screws I had placed on the windowsill the day before were now scattered all over the stairs. I knew this couldn't have been my dog causing it because the windowsill was way too high for him to reach it. I'll admit it, this gave me the creeps. I decided to lock up, take my dog, and head back home. I gave myself a few days to chew over what had just happened, and every logical explanation I could come up with just didn't hold. I finally went back one morning and started working on the house again. This time I left my dog home. It wasn't long after I had started drilling that I could hear a creaking noise coming from the second floor. I put my drill down and I walked to the second floor. I looked at the attic door. It was moving. I grabbed a flashlight from my tool bag and I went back upstairs. I opened the attic door and once again I was greeted by that horrendous cold air from inside. I once again noticed something on the floor, and thanks to my flashlight, I saw it clearly from where I was. There on the attic floor was a small toy, a child's toy. I didn't see it the times before when I had been in the attic, and I didn't see it the day I found my hammer up there, but maybe it was due to all the darkness. Either way, I know it hadn't been there when I bought the place. I went back downstairs to continue working, and that was when I heard the attic door slam shut. When I got home that evening, I told my wife that I was considering hiring some ghost hunters to check things out. She begged me not to. She just repeated what she had been saying since the activity first started. Hurry up and finish the house. Just please get it done so we can move on. It took 2 years, but the house was finally done, and I am happy to say that the activity has stopped. My wife and I are now living happily there. I don't talk about the activity with her anymore, but I do think about it often. Maybe she was right. Maybe there were ghosts in the house. It was one Halloween a few years ago, and my friend and my brother thought it might be fun to go out and check out a few cemeteries. We were too old for trick-or-treating, we didn't like costume parties, and we really just wanted something unique and potentially scary to do. We waited until dark and drove around the city trying to find a large enough cemetery to explore that wasn't too close to any major roads. We didn't want to risk someone calling the cops on us because we were in a cemetery after hours, and we also didn't want to have all the noise coming from cars going by. I guess we thought it would be easier to hear any strange sounds that way. In our city, you can't be inside any cemetery after dusk. You won't get arrested if you are, but you'll probably get a citation or at least a warning from the police. What they're really looking for are people that are out drinking and are underage, or someone that might try to vandalize the location. Both are things we would never do, and you shouldn't either. We just wanted to get a good scare and make a good Halloween memory. Nothing else. Besides, it seemed that all my other friends all had a really good cemetery story of their own, and since I didn't have one, I figured Halloween was the perfect night to go get one. We finally settled on a fairly large cemetery that was about 5 miles from where we all lived. There weren't a lot of headstones there, everything was pretty spread out, but it was big. It was also far enough from the road that we'd be pretty hard to see if someone drove by. The nearest house was several blocks away, so we felt pretty confident with our choice. We grabbed our gear, if you could call a couple of flashlights and cameras gear, and we headed into the cemetery. It was cold that night. It had been raining earlier and the rain had turned to snow. I was feeling cold and I wished I had worn better clothing. My brother wore a hat and jacket while my friend was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Yeah, he's nuts. We picked a spot near the groundskeeper's shed as a sort of makeshift base camp. We spread out, each of us with a camera and a flashlight, and we each agreed to meet back at the shed within 1 hour. It seemed like enough time to at least get some good photos and maybe even see or hear a ghost. At least, that's what paranormal TV shows had led me to believe at that point. It had been maybe 30 or 40 minutes into the ghost hunt, and I had basically walked the entire perimeter of the cemetery. I'd occasionally glance over at my brother and friend and see them pacing around as their lights illuminated the snowy ground, and catch the almost immediate blinding light from their camera flashes. I had maybe taken 3 photos in that entire time, and I was actually feeling bored. I felt like we were maybe wasting time at this cemetery when we could be at a more active one. I could hear my brother and my friend laughing, and they at least seemed to be having a good time. But I wasn't. I was making my way to the back of the cemetery when I could hear something that sounded like running water. As I got closer to the tree line behind the cemetery, the sound became louder and stronger. I thought maybe this could be another opportunity for us since I had heard a few of my friends tell me about scary experiences that they had had in the woods. I stepped just inside the tree line and I shined my light down toward the ground. I could see what appeared to be a small creek running through the wooded area. This was the sound that I was hearing. I followed the stream slowly with my light and got the camera ready. I honestly don't know what I was expecting to see, but I figured if something did happen, I didn't want to miss getting a photo of it and having proof. As I moved my light a little further to the left, I saw something white poking out of the ground. It looked like it was plastic or maybe even painted wood. I just sort of stood there staring at it for a bit and trying to imagine what it might be, when it dawned on me that whatever it was, I was only seeing a small part of it. I then moved my flashlight up and I immediately jumped backwards in complete shock when I realized that what I had been looking at was the leg of a chair and that there was someone sitting on it just across the stream. I ran back to my brother and my friend who were now waiting at the shed for me. "Are you okay?" my brother asked. "Where were you?" I said, "There's someone over there in the woods. We need to get out of here." "Did they say something to you?" my friend asked. "No," I said. "They were just sitting in a chair." "Come on," my brother said. "There's 3 of us. Let's go see who it is." I thought he had lost his mind. I didn't want to go back there, but they practically dragged me back. We went back to the same spot I was standing earlier, and we shined our lights inside. The figure was still sitting there in the chair, motionless. My brother called out, but there was no reply. I don't know why we didn't just leave, and I don't know why we did what we did next, but we decided to go over to the chair. The closer we got, the more lifeless the figure appeared. By the time we had gotten just to the edge of the small stream, we could see that it wasn't a person at all. It was a mannequin. You'd think I'd be relieved, but I wasn't. For weeks I had nightmares that that mannequin came to life and followed us home. Even though it's been a few years, I can't shake the sickening feeling of finding that thing in the woods, sitting in a chair, just waiting for someone to discover it. Every Halloween, my friends and I like to go legend tripping. What that is when you seek out urban legends such as haunted locations and you try to experience the activity for yourself. While I've always been somewhat of a skeptic, I'd always found the idea to be interesting, and it did make Halloween something to look forward to. If nothing else, it was a good time with friends or a way to stay out of trouble. This one Halloween, we were all allowed on the property of a supposedly haunted location. There wasn't a lot to see as the house and garage on the property were being demolished and the rest of the area was surrounded by trees. The only reason that I even took any interest in going there was because of a story someone had told me about it years earlier. He insisted that he and a friend had gone there one night and heard the sound of drums. A few moments later, they both saw what they described as the ghost of a Native American standing in front of their car. While he swore up and down that it was the truth, I frankly didn't believe a word of it. While our city does have a ton of Native American burial grounds, there weren't any near that spot. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy his story. I did, but I didn't believe it was anything more than just a story. A complete fabrication and probably something he had heard from someone else that he decided to make his own. I guess it didn't matter because it had served its purpose. I was here with my friends and we were going to check this place out. We started just after dark and spent a long time just filming the property with our night vision cameras. It was cold and the air was a bit damp. Cold enough that we could see our breath in just about every photo we took. I'm sure I could pass these along to tons of people and convince them that they were photos of ghostly mists, and they'd probably believe me if I was sincere enough when I said it. But I wasn't going to waste anyone's time with nonsense like that, and my friends weren't either. We were looking for the real thing. This had nothing to do with trying to fool anyone. After a few hours and a few hundred photos, with several hours of footage shot on the night vision cameras, we were all feeling the same thing. There was nothing going on here. Nothing caught in the photos we had taken, which we reviewed on the spot just to make sure, and there certainly weren't any drums banging anywhere. Just the distant sound of the highway as cars zipped by. We contemplated packing up and just calling it a night, but I felt like it was way too early to go. I wanted to get at least one more hour in before we called it quits. And with that, we changed out our tapes, loaded fresh batteries, and we made the rounds once again. We had lost the serious tone of the evening by then. We were all joking around and getting a bit loud with our voices. At one point I saw a spider hanging from a tree branch and I asked my friend to stand in front of it as the spider slid down the web. I guess I was trying to make it look like there was a floating orb in front of him and I told him to make a scared face. I rewound the tape and it actually looked pretty good. Thanks to the night vision light and the spider being close to the camera, it made the web almost invisible. It actually looked like a floating orb in front of him. We all laughed at it and I thought maybe I could even use it in a video for how to fake ghosts or something. I began recording again and I focused my attention on the camera screen as we walked. This time, I walked just ahead of them, and they walked a bit behind me as we made our way back to the edge of the property line again. I could see their flashlights shining off in random directions, as well as the flashes of their digital cameras lighting up the trees in front of me. It was starting to bug my eyes a bit, and I contemplated closing the LCD screen of the camera just to give my eyes a break from all the light. When I reached for the LCD and I panned the camera up just a little bit, I saw someone dart past me, about 15 feet ahead, clearly visible in the LCD display. It honestly looked like one of my friends, one of them that was with me. It startled me a little and I thought maybe he was just messing around, just trying to scare me. But when I turned around, I could see both of my friends were still approaching me from behind. They both looked at me and asked why I stopped. I looked at my one friend and I asked, "Did you just run past me?" He looked confused. "No, I was following right behind you." We both were. I said, "No, you weren't. I saw you. I was filming you. You just ran in front of the camera." I told him nice try and I rewound the tape to the exact moment. All three of us stood there and we watched the footage of my scared response and my accusatory confrontation with my friend. In the footage, I could see their flashlights still darting around the trees and lighting up the area ahead of me. But there was nothing else. Nothing on the tape of anyone running in front of the camera. Just a seemingly endless path of trees and blackness. This is the hardest thing for me because I know 100% what I saw was not my imagination. I saw it plain as day. I just wish someone else had too.